everyone. Glad to be here. And what I'll try to give you today is a little perspective from a test and measurement company. I really believe that evaluating the security effectiveness, the performance, and the detection accuracy of security devices is very important. And what we'll try and show you guys towards the end is actually SonicWALL has done a really big bake-off between 6 vendors, including themselves, really measuring some of the things that are very important when it comes to security. So we'll share with you some of the results from that bake-off. I'm sure as you guys walk the show floor, you've seen a lot of the stats about attacks, and everyone's talking about security. Definitely cybercrime in the last several years has really increased exponentially. Attacks are changing all the time, hourly. And some stats from 2010, around 1/3 of the attacks in that given year were actually created in that year. It just gives you an idea of how aggressive attackers are in trying to slide under the defenses of IT and perimeter security devices. A lot of these attacks are really that were used are evasion techniques, really obfuscating the various application protocols and encoding types to basically skate under firewalls and IDSs, ones that don't perform very well anyway. And really, hacking has turned from something that was in the garage with kids 20 years ago to really a criminal enterprise. It's a $1 trillion market, and really a lot of the targets are financial institutions, sometimes defense contractors like Lockheed Martin that got attacked. So what are some of the challenges for IT staff? We walk the show floor and everywhere you see is cloud, cloud, cloud. It really blurs the security perimeter, right? Because now you got your applications owned and run in the cloud somewhere else, and it's very hard to have a very stringent perimeter. Mobility also has really pushed the limits for IT staff, because we've got all these mobile phones and iPads, and somehow you've got to protect these devices when folks go home and they're not in the corporate land where you have the security infrastructure in place. Really, retrofitting security can be a mistake for IT folks. They slap a firewall in essentially, and they don't really understand the performance prior to deployment. And what happens is, these firewalls or IDSs can actually just crap out. And that's what attackers do. In the case of Sony, they actually hammered the security infrastructure of Sony with a denial of service attack, rendering the security devices nearly useless. And that's how they were able to skate through. So it's very important to really test performance and understand how to design, if you're going to have a hierarchy of security devices to handle a large amount of traffic. I think the other big challenge is the range of exploits. You've got client-side exploits that reside on client machines. You've got server-side exploits. You've got traditional or old-school denial of service attacks like a SYN flood or ICMP. But now that's evolving. You have application denial of service, which is, the attacker doesn't need to actually hijack a large number of machines. They can actually just with few number of application sessions bring down a server, essentially by keeping that state of a TCP session open and taking advantage of some of the vulnerabilities within the application protocols. Definitely government and compliance. It's not just enough to do it yourself. There's government-imposed policies that you have to really abide by. So I talked about some of these vulnerabilities over here. One of the most toughest ones to deal with are the application-based ones that really target things at the application layer. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but over 50% of the attacks are really these types. Things like cross-site scripting and SQL injection attacks. One of the other things that corporations have to really understand is, it's beyond just sort of protecting the perimeter from the outside world, from the internet side. It's also important to understand, is data leaking from your corporate LAN? Are users sending out sensitive information out? And your security infrastructure really has to deal with not just the incoming traffic from the internet side, but also traffic that comes in from out from the LAN. So this is an example of an SQL injection attack, and this is what Sony was subjected to. And since many, a lot of the web applications now, they all basically run over port 80. You've got this massive amount of apps that run over port 80, and firewalls 10 years ago, you set a rule allow port 80. Basically, all these apps are going to skate through on port 80, right? So what the attacker does, they take advantage of very poorly written application code where it doesn't really validate what somebody's importing into their browser. And this is they'll fudge with these entries to basically execute some type of SQL query on the back end. A lot of these web applications, they basically have a web tier, an application tier, and a database tier, and attackers take advantage of that. And so, if this isn't validated properly, some of these crazy strings they'll try to type will actually allow the attacker to get all the records within the database, and that's what the Sony attack was based on. Another very common attack is cross-site scripting. And this is now with the proliferation of social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, it allows the attacker to inject HTML code onto these sites. And since there's so much traffic, people viewing each other's friend sites, you're vulnerable to these types of attacks. And what the attacker does is, since they can post HTML to these pages, basically like a wall post or an entry, is they may be inserting HTML code that has JavaScript in it. And you go to the site, and simply without even clicking it, just viewing the page, the attacker can actually steal all your cookies. They can actually put in maybe a URL that you click that takes you to a site that could install a malware or some type of exploit. So essentially they take advantage of this by installing on very visible websites like Facebook, and then basically you view the page. Essentially they can steal your cookies, and a whole range of vulnerabilities could be installed with this type of attack. The challenge is really, how do you figure this out if you're a Facebook? They really allow you to post this stuff. What you really need in these SQL injection attacks and cross-site scripting is a firewall and an intrusion prevention system, or a unified threat management device that can actually look deep into the packets and understand and really have application awareness to look at these things and block them. So that a wall post that has these types of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities can be blocked. I mentioned evasion techniques as well. And this is pretty interesting. A lot of times the attacker will use reconnaissance prior to actually trying to deploy some type of malware or some type of backdoor on a server. And what they do is they take advantage of the way the protocols have been architected. And HTTP was a simple protocol. It really wasn't when it was conceived. Really vulnerabilities weren't a concern. And so what attackers do is, this is a traditional GET request. So when you type something in your browser, this is what you would see if you actually sniff the packet that left your machine and gets sent to the server. And what the attacker does is, since a lot of the security devices that don't operate very well, they'll look for a particular string like this, and they'll look for something that might be malicious, but it's an ASCII code notice, right? And it's looking for a very particular syntax here. What the attackers do is they obfuscate it. They start changing the way the case works. They put backslashes in here. And since some security devices basically look for they use a regular expression, if you're a programmer a little bit, you know this. Since even one little white space can defeat a regular expression. So basically the attacker can skate through the defenses of a security device if it can't somehow normalize this GET request back to the original format. And attackers also will change the encoding type. So instead of just plain text ASCII here, they'll convert it to base 64, which, you know, that's an allowable format over the internet. And again, if the security device can't normalize it, it really can skate through your defenses. You know, so what are top of mind things that you should be thinking about when you're trying to select a security vendor or design your security infrastructure? Well, you need security devices like SonicWALLs that can look deep into the packet and figure out and really understand what the application is doing. It's not enough to just have rules in your firewall that block particular port numbers. You've got to look deep into the packets. You've also got to have some application awareness, because, you know, these packets are fragmented over multiple frames, right? And the firewall actually has to do some type of reassembly to make sense of that frame. And these are some of the terms used in the industry, you know, application intelligence and deep packet inspection. It's definitely important to always be testing, right? Some folks will say, well, you know what, it's just not worth it for us to spend the money on test gear to test this type of stuff. My counter argument to that is, well, if you're going to be subjected to attack, you're going to be spending a lot more money in damages if you don't do the required testing and design up front. What we find as a test vendor is, you know, the effectiveness of a security device can be really, really good with very low load. You know, when 10% traffic through it, yeah, it's blocking, you know, 90% plus of the attacks. But as you increase the load, it gets a lot more challenging for security devices to block the attacks. And what they'll start doing is they'll start suffering from accuracy problems as well. They'll start blocking legitimate traffic, which causes service disruptions for your users. And that means really, you know, lost productivity for campus users on the inside of the corporate LAN. Or if you're retailing over the internet, you have a cloud application that could really mean lost business. So the trade-offs normally in the security business when really evaluating and benchmarking security devices is you're really looking at it. It's really a trade-off between security effectiveness and detection accuracy versus performance. So when you amp up your security countermeasures, you install a lot of rules in your firewalls. You have a lot of signatures in your IDS or your UTM. Essentially, normally performance degrades, and that's something you also have to fight with. And so, upfront testing your security infrastructure, understanding how you're going to have maybe a hierarchy for your rule set across multiple firewalls or IDSs, can help you really have security without compromise. Really high performance, good security effectiveness, and very good detection accuracy. So the methodology that we really push is that you should have really some type of engine that can subject your security infrastructure to the latest vulnerabilities and exploits, and at the same time run your legitimate traffic, whatever mix of traffic is going to be flowing through your device. If it's web, it's video, mail, you should have that mixture of traffic. And understand what the performance degradation might be is if you subject these devices to these vulnerabilities. And this can be especially important with denial of service. You know, really what we've seen with denial of service is that performance can degrade quite a large amount. The other things that are very important when you're looking at the methodology to really understand what, you know, how these things are going to perform is you've got to have traffic coming bidirectionally, right? You're gonna have users on the inside of your LAN. You're gonna have users coming in from VPN services from the internet, and you want to have a mixture of traffic from both sides flowing through the device. Because in one direction, you know, the firewall and IDS may perform well, but bidirectionally, performance can degrade quite a bit. Also important to subject the device to a large number of different vulnerabilities and denial of service attacks. Okay, this is a graphic just showing you just how bad some security devices can perform when subjected to denial of service. And you can see here, this is the baseline up top for application traffic, a mixture of application traffic and IPsec encrypted traffic. And as we start the denial of service attack, you can see performance degrades by 70%. It's pretty much a service disruption for many, many users that are using these devices. So now with the proliferation of cloud, you know, it's easy to target a lot of cloud targets, right? Because they're online and they can be accessible from many directions, and that's what attackers take advantage of now. You know, so the Ixia solution can actually help you, you know, test these types of things. We do this appliance you see here on the right. It can do tens of gigs of real enterprise application traffic, different mixtures, flash, Silverlight, web, email, whatever protocols that you're going to have on your enterprise, we can actually simulate that at very high scale and with a lot of realism. So it can help you actually model the transactions taking place. Are you going to have users requesting web sessions, posting content, downloading email? And then we have an attack library that's 8,000 of the most viral attacks out there right now. And it's a subscription service. So we just like McAfee or Symantec, we'll let you download the latest attacks at any one time. I think I'm competing here with the ladies from WatchGuard. I think they're trying to speak louder than me. So I want to actually skip towards some of the interesting stuff here. You know, what SonicWALL has done in their lab is they've taken the six major vendors in the industry: Fortinet, Juniper, WatchGuard, themselves, and they've benchmarked the security effectiveness, the performance, and the accuracy of these devices. And here's just the topology. You got the SonicWALL, the Juniper, the Fortinet, the WatchGuard, and we're actually sending some web traffic here, and we're sending 574 of the most viral attacks out there, right? And we're trying to measure how these devices block these attacks. And some of the interesting things that we're finding is, okay, there's the block percentage. That's one of the metrics it can help you test, which is really, you know, how many attacks are getting through compared to what we're offering to the devices under test here. Interesting, the results vary significantly. You know, obviously we're presenting this here at SonicWALL, and their performance was really great. 97% of the attacks were blocked. When you look at some of the other devices, performance really varies. On the WatchGuard, you can see 50% of attacks were getting through. To me, that's pretty unacceptable. I actually can show you that the attack, you know, GUI here, just to show you some interesting parts of this graph. Can you help me out here? Perfect. You know, so what we do is we launch the methodology here in this given test that SonicWALL created was they were sending 50 attacks per second. So essentially, I'm not running this live for you, but some of the devices here in this configuration would take a long time to complete. And the reason being is, the Ixia will wait. It'll launch 50 of the most viral attacks, wait, and see what happens until basically those attacks get through or not. And what we found with what we've seen with the SonicWALL is that goes very quickly. But with other devices, the testing time takes a really long time. And what's going on is they're having a hard time killing those attacks. And during those few minutes where the device is either proxying these different TCP connections, the kill time is very important because the attacker can take advantage of these TCP sessions being open and the fact that they're not being killed to actually either hijack them and really get into your LAN and maybe install malware on the inside of the LAN. So all the attacker really needs is those few minutes to install their backdoor software or their malware or exploits. So that's a very important metric to kill time as well. And if you're interested in any of the methodology, the folks here at SonicWALL can give you a live demonstration. They can show you some of the results in more detail. But it's certainly, we believe here at Ixia that this is something that enterprises should be testing consistently, because really the risk of having a security breach is much higher than the cost of really acquiring running these types of tests yourselves. Does anybody have any questions here? Appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the show.